Cracks are appearing in the Three Gorges Dam, and 40 billion tons of water are sitting right behind it. This is the largest dam on Earth. It took 17 years to build. It cost over $30 billion. And for decades, the Chinese government called it indestructible, a once-in-10,000-year guarantee, a wall so strong, nature itself could not touch it. Then the language started changing, quietly, slowly. And earlier this year, something exploded upstream that made engineers across the world stop and stare. Here is what nobody is saying out loud. The forces that just tore apart a certified, state-approved dam in Chongqing are the exact same forces pressing against the Three Gorges Dam right now, every single day. 70 million people live downstream. The simulations have already been run. The numbers are already known. So why does it feel like the clock is running and nobody in charge is making the call? April 12th, 2026, 9:05 in the morning. Everything looked normal at the Chinandong hydropower station in Chongqing. Workers were at their stations. The mountain was quiet. The system was running exactly as it had run for 5 decades. Then the pipe gave way. A 2-meter steel pressure pipe, 2 meters wide, running down a steep mountain slope, carrying water at extreme force, suddenly tore open. What came out was not just water. It was physics. High-pressure water exploded through the rupture, ripping apart concrete supports, shredding steel, and dragging workers into a violent torrent of water, mud, and rock. The entire system collapsed in seconds. By 6:50 that evening, authorities confirmed 4 dead. At first glance, this looks like a local accident. A small hydropower station in a remote mountain area. An isolated incident in a country with thousands of facilities just like it. That is exactly what made it terrifying. Because this plant was not old and forgotten. It was not some crumbling relic that nobody had checked in years. In May 2025, less than 12 months before the explosion, it passed a national safety review. Approved. Certified. Declared safe by the same oversight system responsible for infrastructure across the entire country. Now 4 people are dead. Here's what that certification missed, and what no inspection sheet can fully capture. Steel does not fail all at once. It weakens slowly. Microscopic fractures form deep inside the metal. Walls thin by fractions of a millimeter each year. Welds are under constant stress, contracting and expanding through thousands of temperature cycles. The pipe had been in service for over 50 years. After decades of pressure, corrosion, and invisible fatigue, the only maintenance on record was rust removal and a fresh coat of paint in 2020. Officials blamed rainfall and geological movement. That explanation sounds reasonable, but here is the problem. Engineers build these systems specifically to handle rainfall. Geological movement is not a surprise in this region. It is expected. That is what the engineering is supposed to absorb. So if those forces broke a system designed to withstand them, what does that say about every system built the same way? For decades, the Three Gorges Dam had one story, and that story was simple. The dam was untouchable. When construction finished in 2003, Chinese officials told the world this structure could survive a once-in-10,000 years flood. Not 100 years, not 1,000, 10,000. The kind of language that doesn't leave room for doubt. The kind of guarantee that turns a dam into a symbol. Then the number changed. Once in 10,000 years became once in 1,000 years. Then once in 100 years. Each revision was quiet, technical, buried in official documents that most people never read. No press conference, no explanation. Just a number, getting smaller, year after year, always moving in the same direction, always moving down. By around 2010, something shifted in the official tone. Government statements started carrying a new phrase. Don't place all your hopes on the dam. That is not the language of confidence. That is the language of a guarantee being walked back in slow motion. Then by 2020, the message changed again. The dam is all-powerful, no longer. 4 words that would have been unthinkable in 2003. 4 words that meant something had changed behind closed doors. Then came March 23, 2026. Chinese authorities announced that Chun Wen-fu was under investigation. He was not a minor official. He was a senior engineer at China. Three Gorges Construction Engineering Group, one of the core technical figures behind the dam itself. He understood exactly how this structure was designed, how it was built, and what its limits actually were. Almost the moment his investigation became public, something extraordinary started happening online. Topics that had been untouchable for years began surfacing in mainstream Chinese articles. How long can the Three Gorges Dam safely operate? What would removal even look like? One article asked directly, "The dam has been submerged in water for nearly 30 years. How long can concrete really last under those conditions?" These were not fringe questions from outside critics. These were appearing inside China, and nobody was taking them down. August 1975. A typhoon stalled over central China and refused to move. For days it sat there, dumping rain over Henan province without stopping. In just 72 hours, parts of the region recorded over 1,600 millimeters of rainfall. That is nearly a full year's worth of rain, falling in 3 days. Rivers surged. Reservoirs filled past their limits. And at the Banqiao Dam, the water kept rising. By the evening of August 7th, the situation was critical. The water level sat just 1.3 meters below the crest. Officials sent urgent messages up the chain, local leaders to provincial leaders to vice premiers. They asked for emergency releases. They asked for Air Force support to bomb the spillway open and relieve the pressure before it was too late. The approvals never came. Phones rang. Calls were blocked. Requests stalled somewhere in the chain of command. At 1:30 in the morning on August 8th, the Banqiao Dam broke. A wall of water charged downstream at around 6 meters per second. In just 6 hours, 700 million tons of water surged out. But it did not stop there. The collapse triggered a chain reaction. More than 60 downstream reservoirs failed in succession. Nearly 6 billion tons of water tore through the region. Enough water to supply New York City for almost 4 years. All of it released in a single night. An area 150 kilometers wide and 75 kilometers across became an inland ocean. Over 10 million people were affected. 5.3 million homes were destroyed. Railways were torn apart. Entire systems were paralyzed for months. In 2005, the Discovery Channel ranked the Banqiao collapse the #1 engineering disaster in human history. The official death toll was 26,000. But 8 senior members of China's top political advisory body estimated the real number at 230,000. Here is the one detail that should stop you cold. At the time of its failure, Banqiao was considered one of the finest dams in the entire river system. The engineers called it an iron dam. It was a structure specifically designed to survive a once-in-a-thousand-year flood. The same standard once claimed for Three Gorges. In 2020, 2 separate simulation videos appeared on Chinese social media. Both modeled the same scenario, a complete collapse of the Three Gorges Dam. Both reached nearly identical conclusions. And here is the one detail that made people stop cold. Neither video was ever taken down. In a country where sensitive content disappears within hours, these videos stayed live for years. Some researchers believe the creators had direct state affiliation. Others believe Beijing deliberately allowed the videos to circulate as a warning. Either way, someone decided the public needed to see the actual numbers. Here is what the model shows. The simulation assumes total disintegration of the dam when the reservoir is at its peak level of 175 meters. From that moment, everything becomes physics. The mountains lining both sides of the Yangtze River act like concrete walls, compressing the flood, blocking it from spreading outward, forcing the water to accelerate downstream with nowhere to go. Within 30 minutes, The wall of water overwhelms the Banqiao Dam and slams into Yichang, a city of 4 million people, at speeds above 100 kilometers per hour. Flood heights reach 20 meters. That is a 6-story wall of water moving faster than cars on a highway. 5 hours in, the flood hits Jingzhou, a city of 6 million people. Flood depth reaches 7 meters. Speed is still above 60 kilometers per hour. 10 hours after the breach, the water reaches Wuhan, a city of 11 million people. Ground-level flooding reaches 7 meters. Some areas may survive, most will not. 20 hours after the collapse, the flood reaches Nanjing, 1,500 kilometers downstream, and the danger is still real. Under non-flood conditions, with major lakes still able to absorb some volume, the affected population is estimated at over 70 million people. 70 million, that is roughly the entire population of France, and that is the best-case scenario. If a breach happens during flood season, when reservoirs are already full and lakes have no room left, every single number gets dramatically worse. If those numbers just stopped you cold, every subscriber is automatically entered in our monthly hoodie giveaway. The link is in the description. The simulation describes a single catastrophic moment, a dam that breaks all at once. But most engineers will tell you that is not the real threat. The real threat is quieter, slower, and it is already happening. There are 4 separate forces pressing against the Three Gorges Dam right now. Not theoretical forces, not future projections. Active, measurable, documented pressure, building every single day. The first is seismic. When you store 40 billion tons of water in one place, that weight does not just sit still, it presses into the Earth's crust. Water seeps into cracks along fault lines, reducing the friction that keeps rock stable. Chinese hydrologist Wang Weiluo has spent years warning about this risk. His description is blunt. Placing this much water on fragile geological structures, he says, is like slapping the face of a tiger. You do not know when it will react. The second force is landslides. This is not theoretical. It is already happening. The reservoir water level fluctuates constantly between 145 and 175 meters, soaking the surrounding slopes, then exposing them, then soaking them again. That cycle weakens rock and soil over time. In June 2025, a landslide of 4.6 million cubic meters collapsed directly into the reservoir. Homes were destroyed. Of the reservoir's 5,300 kilometers of shoreline, hundreds of kilometers are now considered actively unstable. Some sections require constant reinforcement just to hold their shape. The third force is karst collapse. The region sits on carbonate rock, a type of stone prone to underground erosion. Water dissolves it slowly from beneath, creating hidden voids that can collapse without warning. Dozens of collapses have already been recorded in the reservoir zone. The fourth force is sediment. Billions of tons have accumulated on the reservoir floor over decades. That buildup reduces storage capacity, weakens flood control, and systematically shortens the dam's operational lifespan. 4 separate forces, all documented, all active. And here is the line that ties it back to Chongqing. Officials say every one of these pressures is being monitored and managed. They said exactly the same thing about the Qinandong pipeline in June 2025. Here is the problem that no engineering upgrade can fix. The Three Gorges Dam is not just infrastructure. It is not just concrete and steel and turbines. It is a national symbol, a monument to what China told the world it could accomplish. For decades, the dam has been the centerpiece of a story about strength, ambition, and the ability to bend one of the most powerful rivers on Earth to human will. Admitting that the dam has serious structural problems does not just mean calling an engineer. It means admitting that the story was wrong. That is a very different kind of problem. When Chun Wen-fu's investigation was announced in March 2026, the significance was not just personal, it was architectural. This was not a low-level contractor being held accountable for a local mistake. This was one of the senior engineers behind the dam's own construction, someone who understood the structure from the inside, who knew where the assumptions were made, who understood the difference between what was promised and what was actually built. His downfall opened a door that had been sealed for years. Almost immediately, articles began appearing inside China, asking questions that had never been allowed in public before. How long can submerged concrete realistically hold its integrity? Has the dam already passed its safe operational window? Is dismantling even possible? And if so, what would that actually cost? These were not questions being raised by foreign critics or outside researchers. These were appearing in domestic Chinese publications, and they were staying up. There are already voices inside China calling for deliberate dismantling of the dam before the decision is made for them. But here is what makes that so complicated. Dismantling the Three Gorges Dam is not an engineering confession. It is a political one. It means standing in front of 1.4 billion people and explaining why the project called the Triumph of the Century needs to come down. Every month that decision gets delayed, the pressure underneath it grows. Not water pressure, political pressure, institutional pressure. The pressure of a system where admitting a mistake can be more dangerous than living with one. Wang Weiluo has spent years studying the Three Gorges Dam. He is one of China's most respected hydrologists. He understands the geology, the engineering, the political pressures, and the institutional blind spots. And when he looks at the future of this structure, he does not see a wide range of possible outcomes. He does not see optimistic scenarios and pessimistic ones sitting side by side on a chart. He sees two endings. That is it. Two. The first is failure. Not the Hollywood version, not a single dramatic crack splitting the wall in half on a clear afternoon while cameras roll. The realistic version is slower, quieter, and far harder to catch in time. A major earthquake shifting the fault lines that run directly beneath the reservoir. A massive landslide, larger than the 4.6 million cubic meters collapse recorded in June 2025, plunging into the water at speed, generating waves powerful enough to strike the dam face directly. A once-in-a-generation flood arriving during a year when sediment accumulation has already reduced storage capacity, when the surrounding slopes are already weakened, when the geological system is already carrying more stress than it was designed to absorb. Any one of these events, hitting the system at the wrong moment and in the wrong combination, could trigger a breach that accelerates faster than any emergency response protocol is built to handle. And if that breach happens during flood season, when reservoir levels are already at their peak and every downstream lake is already full, the simulation numbers are not the ceiling, they are the starting point. The second ending is deliberate dismantling, a controlled decision made by people in authority before the system forces their hand. This is not a fringe idea. There are already credible voices inside China, engineers, researchers, policy critics, arguing that the long-term cost of maintaining the dam, managing its geological consequences, and absorbing its escalating risks will eventually exceed any energy or flood control benefit it provides. The argument is not emotional. It is mathematical. At some point, the numbers stop working. But no government in recorded history has ever dismantled a structure of this scale. The engineering challenges alone are without precedent. The politics are in a different category entirely. Dismantling the Three Gorges Dam means standing in front of 1.4 billion people and explaining why the structure that was called the Triumph of the Century, the proof of national strength, the dam that was supposed to last forever, needs to come down. Neither ending is clean. Neither ending is certain, and neither ending has a guaranteed timeline. But here is what both endings share. They depend entirely on something that no inspection report can measure and no monitoring system can generate. The willingness to make an honest decision. Before circumstances make an honest decision impossible. Go back to Banqiao. August 7th, 1975. The water was 1.3 meters from the top. The warnings had been sent. The requests were moving up the chain. The phones were ringing somewhere above the level where decisions get made. The dam did not fail because the engineers did not see it coming. It failed because the window between knowing and acting closed before anyone with authority stepped through it. Come back to where this started. A 2-meter steel pipe in Chongqing, 50 years of continuous service. A national safety certification issued less than 12 months before it exploded. 4 people died. An official explanation listed rainfall and geological movement, a rationale engineers around the world found inadequate for a system specifically designed to handle exactly those conditions. That pipe was not the story. It was the signal. Because the same forces that tore apart a state-approved, recently certified hydropower station in a remote mountain valley are pressing against a structure holding 40 billion tons of water directly above 70 million people. The same oversight system that declared Chinandong safe in May 2025 is the system responsible for the Three Gorges Dam today. The same institutional pressure that makes it difficult to admit a small failure makes it nearly impossible to admit a large one. And the same chain of command that slows a local decision to a crawl is the chain that would need to move at extraordinary speed if the situation at Three Gorges ever became urgent. That is not a comforting combination. The language around the dam has already shifted. The flood survival guarantee has already dropped from once in 10,000 years to once in 100 years. A senior engineer with direct knowledge of the dam's construction is already under investigation. Public conversations that were completely unspeakable inside China just 3 years ago are now appearing in domestic publications and staying live. Simulation videos of a complete collapse have been circulating on Chinese social media for 5 years without being removed. Something is changing. The question is whether it is changing fast enough to matter. The Three Gorges Dam will not fail tomorrow. That is almost certainly true. The structure is real. The monitoring systems are real. The engineers maintaining it are real. But certainty about tomorrow has never been the issue. The issue is the gap, the space between what is known, what is officially acknowledged, and what is actually acted upon. That gap has a history, and the history is not encouraging. The story of Banqiao was never really about the moment the wall broke at 1:30 in the morning on August 8th, 1975. That moment was just the ending. The real story was everything that happened in the 24 hours before it. The water level rising to within 1.3 meters of the crest. The urgent messages sent up the chain. The requests for Air Force support to bomb the spillway open. The approvals that moved slowly through layers of authority while the water moved fast. The phones that rang and rang. The window between knowing and acting, shrinking by the hour, until it closed completely, and the decision was made by physics instead of people. That is not ancient history. That is a pattern. And patterns repeat when the underlying conditions are the same, when admitting a problem carries more political cost than managing it quietly. When the system built to raise alarms has reasons to keep them low. When the people with authority to act are also the people with the most to lose by acting. The water is not at the crest today. The dam has not failed. But the pressure is documented. The geological forces are active and measurable. The political walls are real and well understood. And the decision that needs to be made is being delayed by the same forces that have delayed every hard call in the history of large infrastructure. If this story reminded you that the unexpected rarely announces itself, grab your free disaster preparedness toolkit. The link is in the description. The cracks are not just in the concrete. They are in the system that is supposed to tell you when the concrete can no longer hold.